In the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA096.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for
Alrighty,
your
Taylor.
country.
Let's see. Let's go ahead and knock out the introduction and then get into why we're releasing late and why I sound like I'm dying.
Hello everyone. Welcome to Doomed to Fail. We're the podcast that brings you history's most notorious disasters and epic failures twice a week, every week. I am Taylor, joined by Fars, a day late.
Okay, so Taylor, I went to Playa del Carmen on Friday,
hmm
and then I was supposed to connect through Mexico City Airport on Sunday for a layover back
hmm
to Austin.
hmm
And have you been to Mexico City Airport?
No.
It is like the only way I could describe it is like the movie Vivarium if it was made in an airport. Like you just go in circles, there's no signage,
hmm
nobody's helpful. It's eventually we got to our gate and we got there like 2, 3 minutes before the close of boarding, which was 15 minutes before departure. And the
hmm
guy's like, yeah, we already closed the gate.
Uh,
And then right behind us were like 5, 6 other women that come running up, and they're like the plane's still here. It's still within the 15-minute window. It's like, no, I already closed it. That means you can't get on.
oh my
It
God,
was
that
like
sucks.
so
It's the
ridiculous.
worst.
So then we go talk to the airline, and they're like, yeah, there's no options. You can buy another round of tickets. They're about $600 a piece one way, for tomorrow. It's just like
What?
ludicrous,
Oh,
ludicrous.
it
Yeah,
sucks.
I've been up since 5 o'clock this morning at the gate being like there's no way I'm like leaving this gate. Like they're not I'm
Oh
not.
my God.
It was a rough it's been a rough couple of days, and it's still
Ugh.
ongoing because now our luggage is in Mexico City and we
Oh
are not
no.
there. Yeah.
Ugh. That's a disaster. I'm sorry.
So
That
anyways,
sucks.
that is
Sucks.
how my mood is right now. How are you?
Yeah, I'm a smidge just discombobulated as well. We went to Palm Springs, which is just 45 minutes away this weekend on Saturday night to visit our friend. And they had like a little Airbnb and we had a really nice dinner. And then Flores got a cough and I was not able to sleep because it was really hot and like the AC just like I think the AC like lowered a lot like automatically in the middle of the night, you know? So I was like trying to fall asleep and Florence was coughing and at 5 o'clock in the morning, Juan was like, we have to leave. We have to get Florence her inhalers at home. So we like packed up and left and we just like texted our friend and we are like, we just left in the middle of the night. And then so yesterday just confused, like tired and confused.
Yeah, when you're not in your usual routine, it's so espe-
hmm
especially the older you get, like your
Yeah,
adaptability to it is just so much more limited. But anyways,
totally.
we're here now. Let's go ahead and dive into some stories for this week. Am I going first?
No, can I go first?
Yes, you can go first.
Um, if like last time you went first and then you shouldn't have, so like I did, like whatever, doesn't matter. Can I go?
You can
I feel
go.
re I feel ready. So I'm going to tell you, Pars, another story that can be found in Billy Joel's Weed and Start the Fire that I have been wanting to talk about for a while. I'm going to close a bunch of my computer tabs so that this works. Um, have you heard about the children of the Little Maid? The Little Maid? I'm going to say it a bunch of times, so I better get good at it.
No.
So, a thalidomide baby, who you may recognize if you Googled it, is a baby that was born in the 1950s or 60s, usually the early 60s, who has no arms or legs. And some other things potentially could be wrong with it, but mostly it's the people who have like their ha just like hands out of their like arm sockets.
Oh yeah. Okay. I know. Yeah, I didn't know. I mean, it's got to be a condition. I never looked into it. So,
So it's okay. So it's pretty crazy. And it's actually not, it's a condition that is caused by a medication that the mother took while she was pregnant. So let me tell you a little bit about it. To research this, I watched a documentary called Attacking the Devil, Harold Evans and the Last Nazi War Crime. And I read the book Francis Oldham Kelsey, The FDA and the Battle Against Thalidomide. So um, there's definitely going to tell you about the UK and the US and what happened.
Okay.
Stop reading the Wikipedia page and just let me tell you. Um, so we'll talk about what thalidomide was and what it did, um, what happened in the US, what happened in the UK. So there's a thread here that I think we should talk about at some other time, like the formation of the FDA and the reasons why you have to have prescriptions for things, and things like that. Because like 99% of human history, it was just like people in the woods trying not to die, And you would be like, oh, this mushroom can help you. This mushroom kills you, you know?
Yeah, you need someone to know that,
Well,
really
yeah,
know that.
but there's no regulation around it. It's just like whatever, because it's like in your village or
Right.
whatever. You're in your town. In London, where they sell you eel skins and, you know, this tonic. So, and people are dying all the time. But then as we have learned things, it starts to get very chemical heavy, So there's people who can actually make things that help people, that help diseases, that do all these things, but they need to be regulated to make sure that they're safe. And there needs to be like the right amount of trials and the right amount of data behind things so that you can't just, and also things need to have a prescription. So you can't just like, you know, buy 700 Oxycontin and then hope for the best, you know?
Right. Right.
So, um, there are also going to be people who are desperate for help, who want to try experimental drugs and experimental things. That will happen over and over again. I feel like in one of the stories I told you, there was a doctor who, um, oh gosh, I can't remember who. I think it was in the Henrietta Lack story where he had cancer and when he was dying, he wanted them to take out his cancer and like potentially that surgery would have killed him, but he was like, use me as an experiment. So
Yeah.
there's like people who wanted to do that. But sometimes people have to say no to a certain drug to say, like, this can't be on the market. People can't have this. Another thing that we're not going to talk about today, but that is a part of this story is there's a ton of animal testing in like a very terrible way that happened like in the beginning of testing and a lot of human testing in very terrible ways, like testing malaria drugs on prisoners, and the Tuskegee uh, trials where
Airman.
they were doing things with syphilis and all these terrible things. Not the airmen, but it was in the same area. But they were like giving black men syphilis and not helping them essentially to see what different drugs would do even after it didn't really matter, like the testing was over. So there's a lot of that. But it's also a lot of like off the books human testing done by sales reps. And I didn't think about what a weird job a pharmaceutical rep is, but you like try to bribe a doctor to using your medicine.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Essentially. It's wild. And it's been like that since like the 40s and 50s. So, I mean, essentially, and they said this in the book about Francis Kelsey, and it is something that you see now. It's like they come in to talk to your doctor for 10 minutes. They give you a bunch of trials of a pill. They like bring you snacks and like bring you things, give you things like, notepads and pens and all that stuff. And then they leave and they don't really keep track of the trials, at least in the 50s and 60s. They weren't keeping track of the trials. And then you have, at least in America, you have ads for these drugs. So you could like open up a newspaper, there's a 10-page ad for this drug that's going to be a miracle drug for you. So you ask your doctor about it, and he's like, I don't know, I met this guy 6 months ago. He brought me a pack of cigarettes. I guess we should try it. So
Yeah.
it's like impossible for them to know everything, but it's just like there should be more, it should be a little more complicated than that, but it's a weird thing.
I
Don't
think,
you
I
think?
mean, if you've seen any of the movies or series or shows about like the OxyContin
Hmm.
craze, like it was basically just that. It was like just
Yeah.
get people who were really good looking and have them buy stuff for the doctors and show up
Hmm.
and take them on free vacations. It's kind of insane.
It's insane. Do you remember, wasn't it in one of those things where they were like, had like a song about selling Oxycontin or
Yeah.
something?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Get a
it.
jingle.
Yeah, I hate it. Um, but imagine that we are on Earth and World War II has just ended. So put yourself in that thing. So knowing what we know, talking a little bit about medicine, you're on Earth, World War II just ended, and there's some things that are happening. Most people are depressed because we've just gone through a war, especially in Europe. Everything's destroyed. A lot of people are depressed. Lots of people are afraid of nuclear fallout. So we're going to like start doing Cold War activities. People are start getting have a lot of anxiety. And some Nazis have just completed some of the most horrifying human tests of all time. And they're going to like slowly start getting out of jail. They're not going to be in jail for that long. Some
Yeah.
of them are gonna like go to South America and never be accountable for their crimes. So they've done things that is like just horrifying. We haven't talked about them in detail. I'm sure we will someday, but just terrible things. Um, so thalidomide is a medicine that comes from Germany. It's marketed as it was marketed as an antidepressant and a cure for morning sickness. And sometimes the cures for morning sickness in this time were like, well, if you're passed out, then you're not nauseous.
And that does actually work for a lot of
You
things.
know, like that did cure my sadness that I just slept for 7 days. Perfect.
Yeah, that's fine.
Um, It came from a company called Chemie Grunenthal, which is still a company. It's called Grunenthal. It still is active in Germany. But Grunenthal became a company because a bunch of Nazis bought Jewish companies during the Aryanization laws. And we've talked about those before, but essentially, like Jewish people couldn't own any companies. So Nazis and Germans would buy their companies for like a very cheap and start to like grow a portfolio.
Right.
Um, so after the war, in um, when they were filing patents for thalidomide, it took them about 8 weeks to get the patent through, which is like way too fast. If they were actually testing it post-war, they were definitely doing testings during World War II in the concentration camps of thalidomide and things that were like it, like other chemicals and medicines that they were making.
Right.
In 1938, they started to make pesticides for other reasons, and they saw that they started to make people convulse, and that's when nerve gas got invented. Um, and you've heard of like sarin gas.
I have. I don't know what it does.
So it's like the nerve agent that just like, you lose control of your body and like that is like, chemical warfare, why you'd have to like have the masks and all that stuff because like then they just shoot you. So they just like they come in, they're wearing their masks, you let out the sarin gas, everybody on the battlefield, is basically convulsing because it's attacking their nerves, and then you can kill them or they die from the gas. Sarin gas is spelled SARN, and it is spelled that because it's named after the initials of the men who made it. So they took their initials. There's Gerhard Schroeder, Otto Ambros, Gerhard Ritter, and Hans-Jürgen von der Linde, and they took um, the SARIN. Yes. And anyway, they used their initials to make it, which is terrible because it killed a lot of people. Otto Ambros is he was in Bergen-Belsen, I believe, like one of the camps, just like doing terrible things to people. They called him the devil's chemist. And I'm sure we could talk about things that he did in particular, but he is one of the people who started the nerve gas. And after the war, he ended up working at Chemie Grunenthal and Dow Chemicals. Like they just wanted
They're
scientists,
all evil. I
they just like
didn't.
didn't
We
give a
didn't.
shit.
Yeah, we did an episode on Dow Chemical. They killed like thousands of
Yeah,
Indians because they
yeah,
wouldn't maintain the chemical plant.
yeah.
The
They didn't give a shit.
industrial, yeah, all that industrial stuff feels kind of like bribey, scammy, and kind of like a little bit crooked.
Yeah, yeah, it feels gross. But because they made the nerve gas that makes you convulse, Hitler wanted an antidote to it. So the opposite of making your nerves convulse is to like de-stimulate your nerves,
Yeah, makes sense.
technically. Yeah. I'm not a doctor, but you know what I mean. I'm making hand gestures. Like I even
Yes.
understand what a nerve is. Okay. So while they were doing that, trying to find anticonvulsive things, they invented thalidomide. It stops nerve endings from like activating. It also makes you a bit high, which is a bonus to anything, really.
Yeah.
Um, so again, there's no way they could have tested it the way that they said that they did when it went to market in West Germany and in Europe after the war. There was one woman who, in the documentary I watched, who said that her brother-in-law was liberating Bergen-Belsen, and he saw babies with the thalidomide deformities. So I'm sure they used it there,
That's
and that's like part of the
crazy.
reason they said they did it. But also, like they knew what it would do. And so what are the deformities? What does a thalidomide person look like? And like how many are
Did you
there?
already go over why the people took this stuff?
I'll tell you. I'll tell
Okay.
you.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, mostly they didn't know and it made their morning sickness go away. And the doctor was like, this is a miracle
Oh, that's
cure.
what
You'll,
it was.
you'll be
It was
fine.
a medicine for morning sickness. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And they were like, you'll be fine. This is perfect. And then they found out later. And then even after they knew, they didn't get rid of it right away. So
Taylor, when you went through this, when you were going through this, Did you not see the obvious thread between like the COVID vaccine uproars and this?
You mean like not trusting or has because it was like made so quickly?
Yeah, like the fact that we like just implicitly are trustworthy of like the FDA and of like doctors when everything we've said so far is like these groups are all kind of crooked.
They are all kind of crooked, but I definitely am pro-vaccine. Like it didn't take that long because we didn't start from the beginning, you know?
No, I know. I'm just saying. So
Yeah. But I understand why there's
I
distrust. Yeah.
obviously got multiple vaccine boosters.
Hmm.
At the time when people would bring up like being anti-vax, I'd be like, you're crazy. And
Hmm.
then after a while, I was like, we all just agreed to inject some shit into our bodies that like
It's true.
hasn't been around very long, hasn't been done before, and we were just like, yeah, it's fine, we'll just do it. And then when I saw John Legend doing a commercial, like he did a commercial for the vaccine, and I was like,
Hmm.
oh my God, like what have I done? But like whatever, I'm past it. It's already been done. Whatever ailments I'm gonna have because of it, if I do, it's already
Yeah, I
over
think we're
with.
fine.
But
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. No,
We shouldn't
totally.
trust medicine just because they're doctors.
That's true. And I think that that's interesting because I feel that makes me feel very conflicted because like do your own research as in like maybe talk to two doctors, don't go on the internet. I don't
Right,
know.
right.
You know what I mean? Like don't talk to your friend, talk to two doctors or three and then see maybe. Um, so yes, that was the next thing I was going to say. Moms are prescribed or given samples of thalidomide for morning sickness, which has never really been researched. Like it has been now, but for most of time, like they didn't give a shit. They were like women have babies anyway. And sometimes they're just women being hysterical, which is not true because morning sickness is real, but whatever. Um, so it didn't matter how much thalidomide you took, it mattered when you took it in your pregnancy. So it messes with nerves. And for a lot of science time, there was a thought that the placenta, which is like the sac around the baby, was a barrier so that whatever the mom did would not affect the baby, which is ridiculous. It's not made of lead, it's made of like gross stuff. Like it's not, how could that? I just
Also,
feel like it's
doesn't
obvious.
everything go through the umbilical cord from the mom?
Yes. Yes. It feels super obvious that whatever the mom does is something that affects the baby. But for a long time, they didn't know that and or they didn't research it and they didn't care and like they thought that the baby was protected in the placenta, which it is not. Um, and so when a mom would take thalidomide, usually they would take it in the first trimester because that's when morning sickness is the worst. And it would interfere with the nerves and the development of the baby. So you can tell when a mother took thalidomide based on the deformities of the child. So if you took it in day 20 to 24 after conception, so you're in your third to fourth week of pregnancy, you're like just pregnant, it would affect the ear development. So the child could be born without ears. If that's all you took and you stopped taking it, then that's the only thing that could have happened to your baby if you took it during that exact time. But if you keep taking it or take it at different times, so if you take it in day 24 to 28, which is the fourth to fifth week, that is the arms. So a lot of the babies had no arms or deformed arms, and that was because moms were taking it in the fourth to fifth week, which just makes sense because that's a good time where you like realize that you're pregnant and you're starting to feel bad.
Right.
Again, if she stopped taking it then and only took it during that time, then it would be only the arms. So if she had not taken it during days 20 to 24, then the ears would be okay. But then the next couple days, if she took it during that window, it would be the arms. The day 28 to 33 is the legs. So it doesn't matter how much she's taking. If she's taking it at all during that time, it'll be the legs. Day 34 to 36, the hands and feet. So it was the arms, and you'd have like a little bit of hand coming out, or like very like small arms, but it would be the hands that were next. And then onward, it was less likely to hurt the baby. So if you took it like after day 40, the defects decreased. So you wouldn't necessarily see it, but a lot of other organs could still be affected, the heart, the kidney, the eyes, the gastrointestinal tract, just a whole bunch of other things that could happen. But day 20 to 36 is the time where it mattered the most if you took it anytime during that time. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean,
Yeah.
it's all based on Yeah, I mean it totally tracks. It's all based on the development cycle, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Wait,
So
so it wouldn't affect the brain?
no, well, a little bit. There are a couple people that I saw like in the documentary where it did affect their brain and they do have like some learning disabilities, but a lot of them don't. It's just physical.
Interesting.
Yeah. Um, so the first documented thalidomide baby was born in Germany. He was born on Christmas Day and he had no ears. So he was like the first one. His father worked at Chemie Grunenthal and he had given his wife some pills to test them out while she had been pregnant. Globally, there were up to 10,000 thalidomide babies in total. More than half of them died at birth, um, either because they were so like their organs didn't form and they were never going to live. Some of them were killed, smothered, left to die in the cold by doctors and nurses. Um, they would like there was a man in the documentary I watched who's a grown man. He had no arms or legs and he was saying that when he was born, they put him in a box and like left him in the corner of the room. And the doctors finally heard him cry and they were like, "Oh, I guess it's alive." Like they were just gonna leave him.
So I think I heard that the first person ever killed as part of like the Nazi, whatever it was, I guess Holocaust, like it was a baby like that. It was like an
Yes.
SS officer whose baby was born with some wild defects.
Mm-hmm.
And they're
Mm-hmm.
like, just get rid of this thing. And like, oh, we're gonna be testing this with other people anyways. Might as well do it with this baby.
Yeah, I think that that story came up in this as well because yeah, exactly that. The Nazis obviously would like, if a baby was born with anything wrong with it, they would just kill it. Um there was some I think there was later, but there's some doctors who would just be like, forget you had a baby and go home and just get pregnant again and do it again. Let's just forget this one. You know, like
It's kind of nuts.
you can't see it, like you don't want to see it, things like that. Um, there were also exposure like around the world, so it definitely was in like parts of Africa, parts of Asia, but I have some numbers from Europe and um, the most thalidomide babies were born in Germany, in West Germany. East Germany did not approve it. I feel like probably because they were busy with like dealing with that being East Germany, they were like trying to get heat, like they weren't worrying about like fancy drugs. So they
Well,
didn't have
yeah.
it in East.
Also, yeah, this was probably also a luxury drug, right?
Yes, yes, exactly. Yes. So there are about 2,500 to 3,000 babies born in Germany, and 2,000 in the United Kingdom. Japan had anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500. Australia and New Zealand, there were 400 to 500. Canada, there were 115 or so. Sweden, 180. Other countries in Europe, there were about 200 in total. And in the United States, there were only 17 babies affected, and I will tell you why. There were only 17 in the US.
FDA.
Yes, but in one particular person at the FDA who said no
Right.
a bunch of times. So a quick timeline of the FDA, exactly. You're exactly right. The first federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act was in 1938 that replaced the 1906 Pure Food and Drug Act. So the 1906 Pure Food and Drug Act, I only laugh because this is ridiculous. They created it because there were people putting antifreeze in kids' medicine because it knocked them out.
We were either so much hardier. Is this why we were hardy back then? Because like
I
we
mean, like if
just
you survived this, like if your parents would like give you poison so they could go to the movies or they could go out dancing, then like, yeah, if you get through that, then like you just have to, you'll be a raging alcoholic the rest of your life, but like you'll live.
I mean, now we die of peanut allergies. So
I don't know.
there's that.
I don't know. Um, so so the 1938 Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act started the FDA. And I thought it was interesting that they added cosmetics, but it totally makes sense there should be regulation on stuff that you like smooth all over your skin because again, we're porous, like a placenta.
Right.
Like
Right.
shit's gonna get in
Nice
there.
callback.
You know what I mean. And this is the first time they involved chemistry. They're like, oh, we should use science in deciding what is safe and what is not safe for people to have in and on their bodies. Um, so introducing Frances Oldham Kelsey. She is a doctor who saved the babies in the United States. She was born on July 24th, 1914. She will live to be 101. So I just wanted to reference another Billy Joel song and say sometimes the good die old. because it's pretty
Oh,
cool. So long.
yeah.
She was born in Canada to very British parents. She ended up going to Chicago for her PhD, and she's going to have several postdoctoral fellowships in pharmacology. Her husband is also a doctor. He goes to South Dakota. His name is Fremont Ellis Kelsey. They married in 1943. They have two daughters. And like they're so smart and they're very supportive of each other. So they're like the kind of couple that's like, I'll watch the kids, you go get your MD, then you watch the kids and I'll go get my MD,
That's great.
just like all that stuff. So, in the 1960s, Frances Kelsey was hired by the FDA to review new medicines. So each new medicine that would be asked to be approved by the FDA has a go through an application process called an NDA, which is a new drug application. And it can be anything from like a little to a lot of research. And sometimes it can be things like, I'm a doctor and I think that this pill that my friend uses in Italy can help my patient that has this very specific thing. My patient has agreed to try it. Can I try it? So it's like you just like one person trying a thing. And sometimes it's like these huge companies that are like, we've invested, millions and billions of dollars in creating this drug. We want it to be able to be sold in the US. So what they look for is like clinical trials, animal testing, and like there's definitely a lot to talk about with animal testing. But did you just ever listen to Dr. Death?
Mm. Are you talking about Jack Kevorkian?
No. There's like a podcast called Dr. Death that talks about like different doctors um who it's like messed up and like just did really like dangerous things. And one guy was like lied that the same things were tested on animals and they weren't, and it just like obviously didn't work in like a human body and like in anybody at all. So it's like kind of wild stories. But they get all of this research, they get these applications. When she started, there were seven full-time and four part-time physicians just reviewing the applications. And a lot of stuff got through that maybe shouldn't have gotten through because they would just, you have 1,000 applications at your desk and you're paid per application in some cases.
Right.
So you're just gonna like kind of zoom through them. So um one of the first things that came across her desk when she started at the FDA was a drug called Kevadon, which sounds like the word Abaddon, which is a portal into darkness from the Bible. But Kevadon was thalidomide. That was the name of the drug in the US. And it was being distributed by a company called Merrill, and they really wanted to push it for morning sickness, for anxiety. So they also would say things like, well, what if we sold it to like just men for anxiety, But you're like, you can't control that, and that's not how that works. Like if
Right.
anyone happened to have it, these things could happen. She kept sending them requests for more information, but she was never satisfied that it was safe. In the UK and around Europe, they will start to make the connections between thalidomide and these deformities. By the time they do that, by the time they take it off the market in 1961, it never got into the United States, and it's because of her, because she kept saying no. And even with all the pushback and like the money and all the things, she was just like, I don't feel comfortable with this. I don't think it's safe. So it didn't go through. In 1962, she was awarded the President's Award for Distinguished Federal Civilian Service. There's a really cute picture of her and JFK where he's like giving her an award.
Fun.
Um, yeah, she would win a ton of awards. She got a lot of really great fan mail. That was like in the book that I read, and it was very sweet. It was like the moms being like, I 100% would have taken that shit. Thank you for taking it off the market, for not giving me the opportunity, you know? It's
All
like,
it does is
all
just
really
put you
makes
to
sense.
sleep.
No, no, it didn't. That didn't just put you to sleep. It would just like calm you down, make you a little high, and you wouldn't be sick anymore. So it didn't put you to sleep. No, no, no. I was saying like in the beginning, I was like when people were studying morning sickness, they were like, let's just knock them out. Like no one really studied it, but this like
Oh, I
seemed to
see.
solve the problem. So they just were like, sometimes like they have a drug and they're like, oh, we found out it does this thing. So
Yeah.
we can market it for this. It was kind of like that. Um, so she's going to get a ton of awards, a ton of mail. She did save a lot of babies. Other things that she'd work on. She works in the FDA for 45 years. She works on things like trying to stop fake sugar from entering the market and other drugs that were not safe. But she, would live it be pretty famous in the United States until her death in the 90s, because of all of the work that she did to stop this from happening.
You know what's
Makes
funny?
sense?
As much shit as I just talked earlier about the FDA, when I was in Mexico, I did go to a Mexican pharmacy because I was just out of curiosity, and they had like a lot of like knockoff brand version of like drugs that like the names were familiar to us,
Hmm.
and I was like, this feels risky.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if I want to roll that kind of a dice.
Yeah, and I feel like there's so many things that complicate it too. Like, I don't know, how does this interact with this medication or like this thing that I'm doing, you know? Like
Yeah.
that all it feels kind of scary to think of like, and then like maybe you're the first person who ever took those two drugs together, you know, and like something terrible happens. So it's hard to even tell, what it could do.
Yeah. But it also goes back to the point of like this is all human created stuff. Like
Yeah.
a company invests money to create a product, in this case a drug, and then they do whatever they can to get that drug approved and then
Hmm.
cram it down the throats of doctors.
Hmm. Yeah, and like the goal initially was to stop your nerves from convulsing when you get hit with nerve gas.
So I remember this from law school, which was that for the longest time, drug companies weren't allowed to advertise drugs on television or like directly to
Hmm.
patients. It was always supposed to be this like d drug company to doctor to patient kind of chain of command or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, but what they got some ruling or something where they allowed that to happen. But as a result of that, it was then the burden of risk of taking that drug was transferred from your doctor to you, and
Hmm.
the way they could allow that to happen was at the end of every commercial, they had to tell you every potential thing that a doctor would tell you. So you know what the
Hmm.
risks are when you go in and you actually ask for the drug by name. That's why every commercial ends with this is going to cause
Yeah, yeah,
blindness,
yeah.
death, suicide. Like you don't even like just thing after thing after
Hmm.
thing.
Hmm.
So wild.
That's wild. Yeah, I don't know like the best way to do it, you know?
Our healthcare system is so crazy.
It's wild.
It's crazy. Like
Yeah.
everyone's got their hand in the cookie jar, or the fact that like there was some daily podcasts around how the Biden administration had renegotiated like the prices of like diabetes medication or insulin or
Hmm.
something through Medicare or Medicaid,
Hmm.
and how like they're only allowed to negotiate like these 10 drugs, and then like in a
Hmm.
couple of years they hope they can increase that to like 20 more drugs. It was like, what are you talking about? You're the federal
Yeah.
government. Like,
I wonder what the list is. Oh wait, okay, I'm looking at it from August 2014. So list of drugs. Because I take, oh, mine isn't on here. I take a blood sugar pill. Um, but mine's only 54 cents a month. Isn't that amazing? Like I don't know why it's like 54 cents a month.
well, probably because so many people do have to take it that the
Yeah.
per unit cost can be.
But I mean, like, but that's like, I mean, a whole thing where like, they'll sell an inhaler in Canada for $50 and in the US it's $800,
Yeah,
like that's real fucking shitty.
yeah, yeah. Um, Interesting. Okay. I
Yeah.
I never knew that I never knew this was anything other than like a genetic defect as opposed to
No.
like someone taking a drug.
Yeah. It's not genetic at all. And I have another bit to tell you
Yeah.
about what happened in the UK. So in the UK, it was marketed as Distaval from the company Distillers. So Distillers was a booze company. They made Johnny Walker gin and Gordon's gin. And they bought their thalidomide directly from Kemi Grunenthal, and they did it honestly just because they heard that drugs are going to be more popular than booze. So like we should get into drugs.
I mean, they're not wrong.
Um, so it hit the shelves in 1958 in the UK. The UK Health Ministry, they just took the tests that distillers said they did at face value. They got their tests directly from Kemi Grunenthal. They didn't do any of their own testing, and they said, "Great, seems fine." They didn't ask for anything else the way that the FDA was asking for more. Again, it was a miracle drug for mom. So, the doctor would be like, "Oh, you feel terrible. Take a couple of these, you'll feel better." And you did. Like you did feel better. Um, and so this is also like, so we're in the late 50s, early 60s, and you're living in like a tiny town in the UK and you maybe just get them from your like the town GP, like the town doctor. Um, and sometimes you get them from like other people. So like the 17 babies that were in the United States, most of them were because like someone went to Europe and then while they were in Germany, they were like, "Oh, your wife has morning sickness, give her this." You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Or they were like, "Oh, this was prescribed to me, a man for my anxiety. You seem anxious. Why don't you take it?" Without even thinking that like that could potentially be different for a pregnant person. Um, so a lot of people, this started to happen and they didn't know what was happening, obviously. So they thought that, it was a genetic defect. They thought that they had done something wrong, like like something that they should have not done that they didn't, they could have possibly known about. Um, there were priests that would be like, it's God's will, which is just
Yeah.
like, fuck you.
Yeah.
Um, and a sad thing, they don't have the exact number on it, but a lot of the dads left and they left the moms with the babies. There was a sweet mother, and she said, my husband said it's me or the baby. And she said he left and I haven't seen him since. And it was had been like 50
What's the
years.
mom supposed to do? Bash its head against the rock? Like this
Yeah.
laws still exist.
Yeah. No. Many were born, again, like I said, alive, but not allowed to live. So they were left out or they were smothered, because they were deformed. Um, and at the time, the Minister of Health in the UK is named Enoch Powell. And I looked him up and he like has a whole thing about wanting the people who were colonized by the British to leave Britain and go back to their homes. He's got a lot of stuff going on, but he's the one who disapproved it and didn't ask for any more tests. He also they had tests that said that a pap smear can save lives because it can detect cancer early, which it can. And he refused to let it be legalized in the UK for like 5 years for no reason.
Weird.
He just like didn't want to.
No, it probably
Um,
wasn't getting bribed by the right person.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yes. Yes. You're right. So before the thalidomide scandal, a journalist named Harold Evans, before he becomes editor of the Sunday Times, he launched a campaign for pap smears and he won and got them to be something that they would do in the UK. Um, so once they started to realize that it was thalidomide that did these things, they finally took it off the shelves in 1961. But they didn't, like Enoch Powell wouldn't take the existing stuff off the shelf. And he wouldn't tell people why he took it off the shelf. He just like didn't, and you're right, he's probably being bribed people not to say anything,
Yeah.
you know? Um,
Yeah,
so
because
Harold,
if he said something, he probably would have subjected them to legal liability because
exactly.
then what you have the highest person for that role saying that.
Yeah. Yeah. So Harold Evans was like, okay, and I'm the editor of the Sunday Times, biggest paper in the UK. Like, let's try to help these people and try to find them and get them together. Because a lot of families, like I said, didn't know. Like you're the only kid in the village who's like that. Who knows? You never met anyone else like you before. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So um in the beginning, 62 families got together to sue, but while they were in litigation with distillers, um, the press was not allowed to report on it. It's no longer the law in the UK, but it was then that you couldn't report on an ongoing trial. So they pushed it out as long as possible until pushed it over 3 years, making it really hard for other parents to find them. Because they would have been able to be like, does your child look like this? Did this happen to you? It could be this. Come join us. And then they would have to be like, do you remember taking a pill? And they'd be like, yeah, someone gave this to me, or like my doctor gave it to me. Here's the bottle, or it looked like this, or whatever. But they made it really hard for them to find them. So finally, some parents just wanted to settle with distillers. Distillers was going to give them like a couple £1,000 and be like, you go away. But one father, he was an art dealer named David Mason. He and Harold Evans worked together a lot, and they started a moral campaign. So they were allowed to do, not necessarily talking about the facts of the case in the paper, but they were allowed to talk about what was happening to the children. So they started to send journalists to live with the families and be like, how, a lot of the families had like 5 kids, and one of the 5 kids can't walk.
Yeah.
So like how difficult that life is for them and the assistance that they need to be able to do that. Also, like this is something interesting that they said in the book that I hadn't thought of is like pre-industrial revolution, and we've talked about this too, like in medieval times, like everyone was kind of deformed, you know? Like you broke your arm was broken forever. Like
Yeah, that's a good
you
point.
you weren't like if every time you get injured, like it compounds it because you can't there's no real doctors. Like I said, it's like someone selling poison in the woods, like trying to make you feel better. So before the Industrial Revolution, seeing people who had like physical abnormalities was normal because they would be like unfortunately, on the streets,
Yeah.
or like you see them around. Then they start to do things like create hospitals and places for them to go. I mean, not great places, but places, and they hid them from society. So now you have these kids, and people haven't seen anyone like this before. So they would like one of the journalists went to the beach with one of the kids and the whole beach cleared away, or they go to the store and everybody would leave the store. Like it was contagious,
Yeah.
like people were just like treating them really, really poorly as well, on top of like everything else. So they weren't blaming distillers these in the paper, but they were like, look at this, like trying to get around it. And distillers was trying to sue them this whole time too, but they were just like, we're going to talk about it because people need to know about it. Um, Distillers was so mad at David Mason, the father. His daughter Lisa um, was one of the victims. Um, they took custody of his daughter. He got him to lose custody of her because they were like, he's not taking the settlement. He's a bad parent. He could be getting this money for her. Um, and eventually he got her back, but he wouldn't stop. He was like, this is not enough money. Like we need ongoing support and like we need care. They ended up getting it to a debate in Parliament, and David Mason went to the United States to meet with Ralph Nader, who we should talk about.
He is a very interesting character.
So interesting. So he's like young, super cute. He has like black hair, and he's a consumer advocate. And so he worked with David Mason to help work on their case against distillers. They wanted 20 million pounds as like for all the families, like in total, that were part of the lawsuit. So they were like, distillers is never going um to do this. Like you can't, they're never going to give you the money that you want. And one thing that David Mason did and they decided to do is so David Mason is on the plane to the US to meet with Ralph Nader to figure out what to do. He's on the plane and they have the drink cart. And they're coming around and they're like, "Oh, would you like some like a whiskey? We have a Johnny Walker." And he was like, "No, like this is the company that I'm in the middle of this lawsuit with." So he walked behind the flight attendant the entire flight and no one bought gin from or booze from distillers on the entire flight. And he said this in an interview that he had with Ralph Nader. And he launched a boycott of distillers' products. In 1972, their stock lost $35 million in 9 days
Good for him.
because people boycotted, and that's what got them to finally give them the money. They gave them 20 million pounds, and they said, "Well, we're going to get taxed on this money, so we need an extra five." So they gave them 25 million pounds. Um, Distillers will eventually be sold, and it is now owned by Diageo, which owns like all the drinks.
Yeah.
And Diageo still pays into a trust for the children of thalidomide, and they adjust it for inflation and they adjust it for their needs. So they're doing it. They're
So
really,
how many adults are there right now from this era?
there aren't that many. There's maybe like a couple hundred folks left, like 800. Not that many.
It's a rough life, man. That is a rough
Yeah,
life.
it's really rough, you know. Um, In 2010, the Minister of State for Health Services in the UK, Mike O'Brien, publicly apologized for the role that the Health Services Ministry had in the thalidomide scandal, and a lot of them were really, grateful to have that official recognition and that official apology. There have been some thalidomide babies in the past couple years in South America, because they have been using it to treat leprosy in some cases because of that same thing where it inhibits the production of inflammation. And when you have leprosy, it's just like all this is like inflamed things. So they're experimenting at doing that there. And then in some cases, um, women have accidentally taken it during pregnancy or before they knew they were pregnant, or I mean, imagine having leprosy and being pregnant.
I don't, yeah, like
I don't even know what that, I'm so, like, I'm laughing because I just don't even know what to do with that
the
information.
combination is just like
Yeah.
oil and water a little bit.
Oh my God.
Um, Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wild,
So that's it.
wild little intersection. We got a Ralph Nader shout out in the middle of this one too.
I know. I feel like I want to learn more Ralph Nader things. I just feel like we were soured by that little election thing. But also he made everybody use seatbelts, which is a good thing. So,
Um, yeah, he was also right about that the Ford Pinto. But I
hmm,
think what people, because he drafted unsafe, or he wrote unsafe at any speed. That's when he became like he blew up on the national stage.
hmm,
Was going after Ford Pinto? But it's interesting because like in that situation, that's just how cars were made. It's not that the Ford Pinto was like a unique shit box. Like they were all shit boxes.
right. But he was like, let's stop them from being shit boxes, but like call it out.
Yeah, yeah. So also, it was named after a horse. A Pinto is a type of horse.
Not a bean?
No, it was not named after the bean. It was named after a
Hmm.
horse.
Does it look like a pinto bean? Let me look it up.
Sort
You know
of.
how they have like the things?
Sort of. Yeah. Anyways, that was fun. That was an interesting story. It made
Yeah.
me think a lot about, you know,
Huh.
just how things work here.
Yeah, it's
But
wild.
yeah. So
Just try to stay alive every day, and that's all you can do.
that's all you can do. That's all you can
Hmm.
do.
Hmm.
Never fly into Mexico City International Airport. Do anything
Okay.
you can. If you have to reroute yourself to the Arctic Circle to get around going there, please do so.
We were
You
in,
will
it
never
reminded me,
leave.
it reminded me a little bit. We were in Tokyo, and the Tokyo has the biggest subway station in the world, and we were lost in there for like maybe an hour. There's no exit signs. You're like, what the hell? One time we went out a door, we were like, in a building that we couldn't get out of. We were like, what? Like, have
It's
people been here
crazy.
for days? How do you get out of here? It's
It's great.
crazy.
You don't get your gate until 30 minutes before boarding.
Hmm.
Also, they will close boarding before when they say they're closing boarding, if even if people aren't there. And then the best part is if you get your gate, sometimes the gate's on the other side of the airport. So it could take you an hour, it could take you 30 minutes. You have no idea. It's just so
No
good.
idea.
There was a guy
It
sitting behind me in line earlier today, this morning. He was like, I've been here since Friday. I can't get the flight. I was like he looked,
is he like unshaven and
yeah, like
like,
he was like a shell of a man. Like just his skin was like gray. It was really weird.
oh my God, poor guy. That sounds terrible. Yeah, no. Um, I I one time, remember one time I went to the airport in Germany. I don't know if it was in Berlin or like a smaller airport outside of Berlin, but you checked in at your gate. You just like every door was a gate. You checked in there and then you walked right to your gate. I was like, very efficient of you Germans. Good job.
That's not, yeah, that's not a bad way to do it.
Yeah.
Anyways, thank you for sharing, Taylor. Is there anything else that you want to say before we sign off?
I did want to quickly mention that it is almost October, and I don't know if you know or you saw, but the calendar for Scary Movie Night is out. Our friend does a Scary Movie Night, so I wanted to challenge you to join us at least once this year, Fars, because you never join.
I'm just, yeah, I'm bad at the time zone thing.
Juan
And
was
I'm
like,
very,
the only job of someone in Central Time is to figure out what time it is in other time zones. So you can't be bad at it.
that's 100% true. He's actually not right. He's not wrong about that. Um, yeah, that'll be exciting. Yeah, a lot of fun stuff coming up. It's incredible. I can't believe it's already October. Like,
I know. Wild.
and we're about to head into an election. It's gonna be a crazy couple of months.
Yeah,
But
can't wait.
TBD. Okay, cool. Anything else?
That's it. Thank you. Everyone, please find us at doomedfellowpod on all the socials. If you have any suggestions, email us doomedfellowpod@gmail.com and tell your friends. Leave us reviews.
Please.
All the things.
Awesome. I'm gonna go ahead and cut it off.
Bye.